Brahmanath. Om. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Swastha.
Hello students, welcome to the third unit of 3 questions by Leo Tolstoy. Before we go and discuss the third unit, let's just recapitulate the second unit. In the second unit, the king, who had 3 questions in his mind, that what was the most important time for every action? Second question, who was or who were the most necessary people? And the third question, what was the most important thing to do or the most important business to do? And to get the answer to his 3 questions, he proclaimed, announced in his kingdom, and many learned people came, but various were the answers to every question. The king wasn't satisfied, he wasn't pleased. So, he decided to consult, to meet a hermit and to find the answer to his 3 questions. So, he went to the wood where the hermit lived in a single cell, means a single small room. And as the hermit did entertain only common folk means common people, the king had to present himself, dress himself as a common person. And so he got off, he dismounted from his horse, he left his bodyguards, his soldiers back, and he went all alone to the hermit. When he reached the cell of the hermit was digging the soil, the ground. And when the king went close, the hermit did not discontinue his work. He just greeted him and continued with his work. And the hermit was a very weak and thin person. So feeling pity on the hermit, the king offered his service to the hermit. And he asked for the spade. And he requested the hermit to take rest for a while. The hermit gladly thanked the king. And he gave the spade, he handed over the spade to the king. And he sat down for a while. The king dug 2 beds. And he again asked his questions. The 3 questions he asked to the hermit. This time, again the hermit, he listened. The hermit got the questions, but he did not answer them. Rather, kept quiet and moved on with the questions, saying that, now you rest for a while and hand over the spade to me, so that I can continue digging. But the king continued his work instead of handing over the spade to the hermit, despite asking for it. And the sun set. The sun hid behind the trees. It was the dusk hour, which was getting closer, advancing towards night. And the king again, he repeated his questions, and he said, he was a bit angry this time, so he said to the hermit, I have come here to get the answer to my questions. And if you can't answer them and you don't want to answer them, kindly tell that to me and I would go back home. To that the hermit points out that a man, a wounded man, indeed a bearded man, was coming, running towards them. The king turned around to see. He saw that a bearded man, a wounded man, came running towards them. The man was bleeding like anything from his stomach. He had his hands pressed on his stomach. And the man came, fainted in front of the king and the hermit and was crying weakly with pain. The king and the hermit opened, unfastened means opened his clothes. Then the king cleaned the wound, the flowing of the blood, with his handkerchief and a towel that the hermit had. And then the king bandaged the wound, but the flowing or the streaming of the blood did not stop. So the king again cleaned the warm blood with water again and again, and then bandaged and rebandaged the wound. Now the wounded man or the bearded man felt a little relief. He revived. He came to senses. And he asked for fresh water. The king offered him fresh water. Then both the hermit and the king took the man and laid him on the bed in the cell or in the small house or the second house of the hermit. The king, who had walked and worked the whole day, was not habitual of doing so much of hard work. He had come walking to meet the hermit. He had dug 2 beds for the hermit. He had now served the wounded or the bearded man, cleaning the wound again and again. He had done so much of hard work, and the king, who leads a lavish, cozy and a comfortable life, is never habituated or accustomed of doing such work. He got exhausted. He was very tired with the hard work that he had done. So he sat with his hands and legs close to his body and his stomach near the threshold. Threshold means the doorstep. He sat over there, and the night passed. Morning, when the king got up, he saw that the man who laid on the bed in front of him was looking at him very eagerly, with serious attention. And when the king looked at him, the bearded man or the wounded man asked for forgiveness. The king was not able to recollect or memorize who was the man, and so he said, "I don't know you, so where's forgiveness in between that? So where does forgiveness come when I don't know you?" The bearded or the wounded man, very politely, he did surrender himself, saying that, "I am your enemy, as you had given a death sentence, punished to death to my brother, and you had completely acquired his property. I had taken an oath, a promise that day that I will kill you, and I knew that you have come to meet the hermit all alone, and I was hiding in the ambush." Ambush means a hiding place. I was hiding in the ambush, and I was waiting for you, but you did not come. The day passed, you did not come, so I came out. And when I came out, your bodyguards, they recognized me. They wanted to kill me, and they wounded me severely. And you are the one whom I wanted to kill, I wanted to take revenge on. You saved my life. And so from today, if you feel that I should be or have life, I should live, if you grant me life, I offer my service to you, that I would be a slave, I would be a servant to you. Not only I also offer the service of my sons as slaves to you for the rest of our life. The king was extremely happy because he had made peace with his enemies so easily. He was happy for two things. He had made peace so easily with his enemy, as well as the enemy has turned to a friend now. The king also promised the wounded man that I would send my physicians and they would treat your wound. So now let's go to the text and discuss the third unit of 3 questions. Having taken leave of the wounded man, the king went out into the porch and looked around for the hermit. Now when this discussion was over, now the king took leave from the wounded man. Now he went in search. Now he had to come back. So he went in search of the hermit. And where was the hermit? He looked around in the porch. Porch is entrance to a building. Okay, here there's no building. It's the entrance to the hermit's single cell or single small hut or room, whatever you take it as. The entrance is the porch area. And looked around for the hermit. So the king came out of the house. He came to the entrance of the cell and he started looking for the hermit. Before going away, he wished once more to beg an answer to the questions he had put. So finally he decided, before leaving, let me again for the last time try asking the hermit my questions and to get the answer to my questions. The hermit was outside on his knees. He was bent, he was on his knees, he was outside sowing seeds in the beds that had been dug the day before. Sowing means when you scatter seeds on the ground to sow them. Okay? So that is called scattering of seeds to grow plants. That is scattering. That is called sow or sowing. So what was the hermit doing when the king approached close to the hermit? The hermit was on his knees, bent on his knees, and he was sowing the seeds in the beds that was dug the before day by the king and by the hermit himself. The king approached him and said, "For the last time, I pray you to answer my questions, wise man." So for the last time, the king, he requested in a very polite manner, approaching close to the hermit. He said, "For the last time, I pray. I'm earnestly requesting you, I'm seriously requesting you. Could you please give the answer to my 3 questions?" And he addressed him as wise man. "You have already been answered," said the hermit, still crouching on his thin legs and looking up at the king and stood before him. So what was the reply that came in return? The reply was by the hermit that, "You've already been answered. I've already answered your questions, 3 questions." And crouching means to sit very close to the ground with legs bent. Okay, he was sowing the seeds. He was scattering the seeds in the soil in the ground on the earth. So he had his legs bent very close. He was sitting like that. And so when the king stood in front of him and he did ask him that, "Would you please, I pray you give the answer to my 3 questions, wise man," he looked up towards the king and he answered that, "I have already answered your questions." "How answered? What do you mean?" asked the king. The king was surprised and a bit annoyed too with surprise, because he couldn't understand. I mean, when did you answer? And what did you answer? And what does this mean? When you haven't spoken anything practically, you haven't told me anything practically, then what do you mean by this that you have already answered my questions? "Do you not see?" replied the hermit. "If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday and had had not dug those beds for me, but had gone your way, the man would have attacked you, and you would have repented of not having stayed with me. Now the hermit starts giving his answer to the question. He starts explaining that how he had answered the king, but the king didn't understand. So he starts giving his explanation. He says that, didn't you understand? You pitied on my weakness yesterday. Pity means showing sympathy. The king felt sympathetic. The king felt pity on the hermit who was weak and thin and was trying to remove a little soil from the ground and was feeling tired and breathless. And so the hermit said that yesterday you felt pity on my weakness and you helped me out. What help did you do? You dug the beds for me and had gone. If you wouldn't have done that, if you wouldn't have pitied me and you wouldn't have dug the beds, you would have got angry and you would have gone. What would have happened? The consequence would have been that the man, the wounded man who came to the king later, was hiding in the ambush. Okay, he was there and the king was ignorant about it. Had the king not pitied on the hermit, on the weakness of the hermit, and wouldn't have stayed back to dig the beds, the king would be killed or wounded by the wounded man or the bearded man. You would be attacked, the hermit says. So, the most important time was when you were digging the beds. So, what was the first question? The first question was, what was the most important time for every action? And here comes the first explanation or the answer to the first question. What does the hermit say? So the most important time was when you were digging the beds. That was the most important time when you were digging the beds for me. And I was the most important man. What was the second question the king had? Who was the most necessary or who were the most necessary people? Okay? So for that, what was the answer from the hermit? That I was the most important man. The answer to the second question. And to do me good was your most important business. What was the third question that came to the mind of the king? That was, what was the most important thing to do or the most important business or occupation? And here comes the answer by the hermit. He says that you did good to me. You paid pity on me. You did good work for me. You did good to me was the most important thing to do or the most important business to do. So the three questions that the king had. What was the first explanation that the hermit gave to what was the most important time for every action? The most important time was when you came here, you dug the beds for me. The second question, who were the most important or necessary people? He said that I was the most important man for you or the most important person for you. The third question, what was the most important thing to do? You did good to me, good noble deed to me. Your good work at that time was the most important thing or the most important business to do. Afterwards, then again further he explains, afterwards when the man ran to us, the most important time was when you were attending to him. If you had not bound his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So what does he say? So the next moment what happened? Afterwards, when the man ran to us, the bearded wounded man came to us running and fainted before us, bleeding from the stomach. The most important when we were attending him. So what was the most important action or the most important time for every action? That was that we attended that man was the most important action at that time. And if you had not bound his wounds, he would have died without making peace with you, because if you wouldn't have cleaned his wounds, bandaged, rebandaged, and you wouldn't have taken care of him, the person would have died without attending or without getting any sort of hospitality. The man would have, or the bearded man would have died. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. So he says that the man, the bearded man, at that moment that we cleaned his wound, you cleaned his wound, was the most important action at that time. And that bearded man or the wounded man was the most important person or the man at that time, and doing good to him, saving his life, okay, pulling him back from the yammer's hand or pulling him back from death, giving him life, was the most important business or the most important thing to do. Now he says, remember then, there is only one time that is important. Now. N-O-W, now. There's a saying that goes like this, that what you are supposed to do tomorrow, do it today. And what you are supposed to do today, do it now. And what does this now say? Now means the present moment. Now, the present moment, because we have the real power. We can change. We can make a turnover in the present moment. Once the time is gone forever. Okay? Today is 17th of October 2020. And whatever the time is, again we'll have 17th of October next year. But you will have 2021. You'll never have 2020 back again. Okay? So the most important time is, whatever is important is now. So he says, there's only one, we have the real time, or the most important time is now, or the present moment. It is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. I just told you, we have the real power to change, to make a turnover, to see, to make certain changes. That is only in the present moment we can do that. Now, once the time is grabbed, once the time flees or passes away, we can do nothing. We become helpless and hopeless. It is the most important time because it's the only time when we have any power. The most necessary man is he with whom you are. For no man knows whether he will ever have dealings with anyone else. So who's the most important person? The most important time is the present time. And the person with whom you are at the present moment is the most important person for you. This is a practical answer. The first two answers that the hermit gave regarding himself and the bearded man to the king were examples to make him understand. Now he has come to the practical answer, the true answer to make him understand what are the answers to his three questions. And so he says that the most important man, the necessary person is one with whom you are at that now, at the present moment, because you never know whether you have a dealing with anyone else of that kind. Clear? And the most important affair means anything to do, okay? Something which is done or is to be done, okay? Is to do him good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into this life. So he says that the third question, he answers the third question so brilliantly, so nicely and clearly. He says that what was the third question? The most important thing to do. The most important thing to being selfish. You need to be selfless. You need to help because you never know you ever get an opportunity to do good to someone, to be good to someone, to help out someone, and when you get that chance, that is the most important thing to do, because we know that service to mankind is service to God. So if we get that scope or chance to help somebody out and to pull somebody out from something which is wrong, or help out somebody who's in trouble, or to be good or do good to someone, that is the most important thing to do in life. And that's the reason why we have been granted, we have got life, and we have been given life by the Almighty. So with this, we have ended up Unit 3. So before closing down, let's just quickly memorize what did we discuss and learn in this class today. So when the king now finally, he was about to take or say bye and leave, he just felt that why not for the last time, let me try and ask my questions to the hermit. So he goes close, he looks for the hermit. He sees that the hermit is sitting in the ground. He's sitting on the ground and with his legs bent and on his knees, and he was sowing the seeds in the beds that was prepared by him and the hermit the previous day. Okay, and he goes close and very politely, with sincerity, the king, he asks his questions again. And the hermit surprisingly says, I have answered your questions, but the king doesn't understand what the hermit says. So the hermit explains with examples. He says, see, first when you arrived, the moment that you came here, I was digging the ground, the soil, and you felt pity. You took pity on my weakness in me as a weak and thin person. You helped me out, you did my work, you dug the beds, and you, otherwise if you would have gone without doing or helping me, the enemy who was hiding in the ambush would have attacked you, wounded you, or killed you, or he would have attacked you. So you saved your life, and so you, the most important time at that moment was that you helped me in digging, you dig the beds, was the most important action at that time. And I was the most important person at that time. And doing good to me was the most important thing that you did. And then he says further, in the next moment, when the bearded man or the wounded man came closer to us and fainted before us, that we cleaned the wound. That was the most important action at that moment. And the bearded man or the wounded man was the most important man or the person at that moment. And being good, saving his life, pulling him back from the hands of death to the hands of Yama was the most important work or thing that we have done, or you have done. Okay, see how brilliantly the hermit cited or gave the answer to his 3 questions with examples. And now practically he says that remember, there's nothing called important time, okay, for every action. The important time is now, or the present moment. The moment in which you are is most important time for you to take up every action, because it's a time when you have the real power in hand to make changes, to have a hold on the work that you do. And at that moment where the person with whom you are is the most important person, or the necessary person, or the man with whom you are, because you never know further, you may not have dealings with anybody else of that kind. And doing good to people is the most important thing to do, because we are sent to this earth. God has made us, created us, and sent us to do good to others, to give our service to others, and whenever you get a chance to do good, to be good to somebody, we should never give up, and that is the most important thing to be done. And so with this, we have completed 3 questions. Thank you.